So Angela, I asked you to come in today because I wanted to ask you about two fruits. Not only are they some of the easiest to grow, but are gaining in such popularity. One being the fig,
Yes.
and the other the pomegranate.
Right.
So they are easy, but this time of year you start to see a few issues, especially with the figs, that people bring us leaves that look like this, and they're quite concerned, but there's really no reason to be overly concerned.
There really isn't a reason. You know, figs spend a lot of energy growing in the spring and summer, and then towards the end of summer when it gets really hot, especially when it's combined with either intermittent rainfall or heavy humidity, they can develop a couple of diseases. They're all fungal, so they kind of get treated the same way. But one of the most common that we see is fig leaf rust, and that's one of the things people say, well, I know I've got fig rust. And they do get leaf spots on the top of the leaf.
Right.
But the main diagnosis for that is to turn the leaf over, and you can actually see how it got its name, that they're little rusty, soft spores on the back of the leaf. That lets you know that that's what your issue is.
Right.
So it is treatable. You know, we can use neem on it. Neem is a pretty good fungicide.
Right.
But you need to remember that you've got to spray not just the top of the leaves till dripping. You've got to turn that sprayer nozzle over and spray under the leaves where the spores actually are.
Right.
But even then, you're really not going to correct the issue that you see. That's not going to evaporate. You will protect the new leaves from infection. And the main signal is to understand that it happens at the end of the season. Pretty soon the figs are going to start dropping their leaves and we're going to get a frost. The main thing to do for next year is to make sure you clean everything up under the tree so that you don't have the spores incubating all through the winter time. So make sure you rake everything up, get everything clean. When you do your dormant oil spraying, that's going to help a little bit with it too. So it's one of those things where it's unsightly, so we don't like it, but it's really not a critical issue for your tree.
So nothing to panic about.
Right.
But best advice, just keep under the tree as clean as possible.
Yeah, think sanitation, sanitation, sanitation.
And if you know, if you drive through neighborhoods and I don't see a fig tree anywhere that doesn't have this appearance right now. It's just very common, very normal.
It is. It's just that time of year, and it's kind of one of the prices that we pay for having those luscious figs the rest of the year.
And they're so productive.
Oh my gosh,
so easy to grow.
Yes.
So if you're a first-time fruit grower, this is a good place to start, is with a fig. It
really is. Yeah, figs are one of the easiest. The biggest thing with them is that they're sun lovers. They're a Mediterranean plant, so they're going to want that full sun. They're going to want good drainage, but they are going to want that adequate moisture, especially while they're setting their fruit.
Right, right.
And good compost underneath them. They're not a very heavy feeder.
No, they're not.
So a good compost underneath them, a little bit of, organics for them, and they'll be fine.
Yeah. So, well, you can't ask for easier than
really
that.
Can't.
No. So another one that often offers issues here, especially toward the end of the summer, or when the fruit starts to ripen, and we have, like you said, these intermittent areas of rain or times of rain, high humidity and heat, is pomegranate.
Yeah, pomegranates. And so really this time of year, the main thing that you're going to see is a problem with cercospora. And that's just a big word for a little bit that we usually use it when we say cercospora leaf spot. We're used to seeing it as a leaf spot. And if you do see that on your pomegranate leaves, or you see dark sunken places on the little twigs, that's a sign that you have it, whether you have fruit or not.
Right.
And the way it affects the fruit is that it'll actually that's what makes those little black freckledy lesions all over the outside of the fruit. So we do want to avoid that as well. Believe it or not, the treatments for that and the two other issues that pomegranates have, which are black heart, and that happens when the fruit may look fine on the outside, but when you cut it open and you split it open, it's either black or rotting or souring fruit inside. That's the black heart. And then the other one is another spot disease that will cause the lesions. But believe it or not, those need to be treated way before you see any signs of them.
Exactly.
So a lot of studies show that the most likely time that your tree is going to get infected is during the bloom cycle.
Okay.
So 8 months before you see fruit that might be affected, that's when you need to treat for it. So copper is the thing that you want to use for that. This is what we want to use. And generally 2 treatments are going to be good.
Okay.
One just as the flowers open, and then the second treatment at what we call petal fall, when most of the flower petals have fallen off. That's when the fungus attacks the flower and then ends up in the developing fruit. So we want to catch it at that time. So generally 2 treatments during that time period will take care of it for you. And of course, pomegranates do need a dormant oil treatment as well. And that'll handle some other things, including the other leaf spot diseases that we may have later on down the road. And then for all of your fruit trees, you can really minimize some of these issues by once a month spraying everything down with EM1. Right. And maybe a good foliar feed as well. You can mix them together and spray at the same time. What these things do is, one, they do feed the leaves. They make the surface of the leaf a little thicker, and so it's much more resistant to the disease issues. And EM is going to actually populate the leaves with beneficial microbes that will compete with any pathogenic microbes that you have. So it's sort of a really good maintenance. It's kind of like taking a vitamin, or we call it a probiotic for our plants, and that's what it really is. So regular treatment with that, at least on a monthly basis for your trees, will help minimize some of these issues. And then timing when it comes to the copper to avoid the fruit issues later down the season. And then it's super important. We have a tendency to kind of think of pomegranates as a ornamental shrub, and they really are super ornamental. They're a beautiful tree. But for fruit production, healthy fruit production, what we want to do is get that tree open, prune it to get it open. So they have a tendency to be a little shrubby when they're young. That's okay. You can choose to grow them as a multi-trunk specimen, or you can allow them to form a little bit of clear trunk first and then branch out. Either one, that's fine. There's not a right or wrong. But once you do that, you want to prune so that you minimize this inward growth and you maximize this outward growth. This is a really well-shaped specimen right here, so that we get air circulation. That's a big disease fighter for us. Air circulation and sunlight into the center of the tree. So we would remove some of these inward facing limbs and we would encourage these. And most of the time at this young age, they need to be weighted. And my favorite way to weight a tree is with either water bottles or milk cartons, both quarts and gallons, depending on how big it is. You can sort of hang them out here with a zip tie loosely, kind of like an earring hanging, and put them on empty. And then start filling them with water, and as you do, it's going to pull this down, and when you hit the point that you're happy with, stop, and then put the cap back on, so that you don't either have two things. You don't want your water to evaporate when you're happy with the angle, and you also don't want rain to fill it up and pull it down and break it. So if you do that, you know, it's going to look a little funny. Your neighbors are going to say, what are you up to over there? But it's a really good way to wait and train your fruit trees to open them up a little bit. And it would really quickly, in one season, this pomegranate would be on its way.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
You bet.